It's confirmed. The 2020 college football season is crazier than the 2007 season. We just saw 8 top 25 teams go down on Saturday. 6 of those were to unranked teams. And earlier in the week we asked, could week 5 of the season be better than week 4? And when all the games concluded on Saturday night, I think we had our answer. Not only was it just as good, it was better. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, breaking down the absolute madness that we just watched this past college football weekend. We're going to break down all of the key games, all of those major upsets that we just mentioned. First, we're going to take a look at how we fared this weekend. And oddly enough, we seem to do pretty well when things get hectic, when things get crazy. Week 4 was pretty wild. We went 19-2 straight up, 6-4 against the spread. Week 5 may have been crazier. We went 18-5 straight up, 78.3%. We went 5-5 against the spread, right at 500. And for everything that happened, all of the unpredictable upsets, and some of these teams that we didn't expect to do as well, playing as well as they did, I'll certainly take a weekend where we break even. So that brings our straight up record to 58-16 on the year, so 78.4%, well above our mark of 76% that we hope to have by the end of the season. 76% or better, have never gone below that mark. And then our against the spread record, 22-21, so right above 500, 51.2%. And again, holding true to our word that we would not drop below 500 for the remainder of the season. I know we have a long ways to go, but we're holding true to that word now, and that record's still one of the best in the entire country. If you don't believe us, go look at the numbers from analysts across the country, and you will certainly see that we are holding true to our word on that as well. So all in all, not a bad week for us, but a bad week for a handful of teams across the country. Let's start here with number 3 Florida taking on South Carolina. Now, not a bad game for the Gators. The third team in the country did not go down in this game. They defeated the Gamecocks 38-24. But the reason we're talking about this game is because, to me, the defense is still a major concern for the Gators. You looked at what happened last week. They went on the road to Oxford, took down Ole Miss, but allowed over 600 yards of offense to the Rebels. They allowed 117 rushing yards this past week to South Carolina. The Gators simply could not get off the field. South Carolina was kind of just enforcing their will on the Gators. Whatever they wanted to do, they could do it. They were 5 for 6 on 4th down in this game. So South Carolina was able to convert, was able to get points. This game at one point was tied, I believe, at 14 all before the Gators kind of pulled away. And if Will Muschamp had managed to clock a little bit better down the stretch, South Carolina, had they scored in the final minutes, could have had a chance of an onside and a chance to potentially tie this thing up. The Gators did win this game, though, by 14 points. Kyle Trask, now a Heisman candidate for many, threw for 268 yards and 4 touchdowns. So a remarkable performance in Week 1 against Ole Miss. Another great performance here against South Carolina. The Gators now travel to Texas A&M next week at College Station, and that's certainly going to be a little bit of a more difficult test, I feel like, than what the Gators have faced in the previous 2 weeks. We then move on to our first major upset of the day. And many people did not see this game coming. They did not see this result coming. But really, should we be that surprised? TCU taking down the 9th ranked Texas Longhorns, the Horned Frogs, going into Austin and winning this game 33-31. Just another game where we now see that Texas is not back and where Texas will not be making the playoff, and they're going to have yet another lackluster season. 33-31 at home, and the Longhorns so close to winning this game, potentially. Keontae Ingram fumbling the ball at the 1-yard line, trailing 33-29. Fumbled the ball on the 1-yard line with 4 minutes left, ultimately sealing the win for Gary Patterson and TCU. And Texas, their new defense under Chris Ash, had no answer for the Horned Frogs. No answer for them. TCU putting up 457 total yards, including 226 on the ground. And to be honest with you guys, I hate this so much for Texas, but really I hate this more for Sam Ehlinger. I respect the heck out of that quarterback and his love and passion for the Longhorns program, and he can't do it all by himself. Ehlinger had himself a pretty solid game there, did everything that he could to lead the Longhorns to a victory. But his running back fumbles at the goal line, his defense couldn't get a stop, or practically non-existent, and now Texas loses early on in the season, and while it is just their first loss, you look at how they played last week against Texas Tech, you look at what just happened now against TCU, and there's no way that Texas, first off, is going to be able to win out, and no way Texas is going to be able to handle themselves when they face more elite defenses, or more elite offenses and defense for that matter, down the stretch over the course of this season and potentially in the postseason as well. Another big upset in the ACC. This is one that, while it wasn't as big as a top 10 upset like we just saw in Texas, was one that I think was one of the most shocking upsets of the day. And that was North Carolina State going into Heinz Field, going into Pittsburgh, and taking down the Panthers 30-29, taking down the 24th ranked Pittsburgh Panthers at home 30-29. This was a Pittsburgh defense that we were praising last week. We had them on our teams trending up, which we'll get to here shortly. And the Panthers let us down. This is the defense that we said was one of the best in the ACC, one of the best in maybe the nation. Shut down Louisville's electric offense last week. Had three turnovers in that game. Held them to just 20 points. And held Javion Hawkins to 12 rushing yards if you negate that 75-yarder that he had. Pittsburgh had no answer for the Wolfpack in this game. They allowed NC State's quarterback Devin Leary, a mediocre quarterback at best, below average if you ask me, they couldn't stop him. 336 yards and 4 touchdowns for the Wolfpack QB. That includes a 13-yard strike with 23 seconds left that was ultimately the game-winning touchdown for NC State. And, I want to criticize Pittsburgh's offense here, and I will a little bit. The Panthers put up over 500 yards of offense in this game, had 411 passing yards from Kenny Pickett. They put up a bunch of yards, but they can't put up the points. They move the ball down the field, they turn it over. Or they would get a bunch of penalties. Pittsburgh had 13 penalties for 125 yards in this game. So they would move the ball relatively well, but they could never convert. They could never get points out of it. They struck first on the first play of the game, and then after that, the offense was done. Non-existent. And so Pat Narduzzi and his squad, they had their first 3-0 start since 2014. Probably should have been 5-0. This game here, another win next week, going into that game against Miami, they failed to do that. A major, major upset in Pittsburgh. One that really isn't being talked about among a lot of people, but one you should be talking about because this was very shocking considering how porous this NC State defense was over the past few weeks. Moving over to the SEC. No surprise here, Alabama destroys Texas A&M. The second-ranked Crimson Tide take down the 13th-ranked Aggies 52-24, so a 28-point victory for Nick Saban and the Tide. And I would say that's more like it. We expected that to happen. Nick Saban and Alabama, they defeated Missouri last week by 19 points. That's a good victory. And obviously, like we've said, that score was really making the game look a lot closer than it really was. But Nick Saban wasn't happy with his team's performance at the end of that game. We expected him to come into this game and take out a little bit of his frustration against the Aggies and Jimbo Fisher. That's exactly what they did. They were tied at 14 early in the second quarter before Alabama scored 21 straight points in just 9 minutes to take a 35-14 halftime lead. And how about Mac Jones? How about Mac Jones? Credit to Alabama's defense, first off. But Mac Jones, everybody was so skeptical of him. He's not going to be Tua Tagovailoa, and we're not trying to compare him to Tua. But I would say he's done a fantastic job filling in for Tua, not just in the games that he started last year when Tua was out with an injury, but like he's doing now. A great performance last week against Missouri and against Texas A&M, going 20 for 27, 435 yards, and 4 touchdowns. That includes a 78-yard touchdown strike, a 87-yard touchdown strike, and a 63-yard touchdown strike as well. 2 of those to John Mechie. Mac Jones, he's the man in Tuscaloosa. And he's doing a great job in Tuscaloosa as well, putting up the fourth most passing yards in a single game in Alabama history, 435. Alabama offense is going to be just fine, and I would say they're looking like the top team in the SEC right now. Moving on down back to the ACC, North Carolina surviving Boston College. Not beating Boston College, surviving. And that's a common trend here. I think every week we have that one team that we would say survived a game. Yes, they won, but they probably should have won by more. And the fact they escaped is more important than maybe just getting the win. Last week that was Texas A&M against Vanderbilt. We said Texas A&M survived Vanderbilt. They beat them 17-12. North Carolina, the 12th ranked team in the country, survived Boston College 26-22. Boston College's 2-point conversion that would have tied the game up at 24 was intercepted late in the fourth quarter and then returned for that extra 2 points. That's why UNC won by 4 points and not 2, and maybe they won the game at all had Boston College scored and converted on that conversion. But this is an Eagles team, guys, that escaped Texas State 24-21 last week. So I know North Carolina hadn't played a game in 3 weeks, but I said, all right, Sam Howell, this defense, this offense, how bad Boston College played last week, who cares that the game's at Chestnut Hill? Mac Brown and his Tar Heel squad are going to walk in there and they're going to annihilate Jeff Hafley and the Eagles. That didn't happen. North Carolina could never pull away. Bill Jurkovec, fantastic game for the Eagles, 313 yards for the BC quarterback, but they couldn't find any balance as they only had 40 rushing yards. North Carolina owned that edge when it came to balance, and that ultimately ended up being the difference maker. Mac Brown and his squad improved to 2-0. They're back to playing football and hopefully playing football consistently. UNC getting a huge win on the road and surviving a bit of a scare there. One game that we talked about in our games of the week was North Dakota State and Central Arkansas. And that's not a game that a lot of people probably watched this weekend, although you should have. Probably not a game that was even on your radar, unless you are a fan of us here at the Gridiron Expert or an avid FCS fan as well. But Central Arkansas traveled all the way up to the Fargo Dome to take on the reigning FCS national champions in North Dakota State, in what many consider to be the Trey Lance showcase game. Trey Lance, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, not just the FCS, but in the country, playing in his lone game of the season. And while North Dakota State does plan on taking part in spring football as part of the Missouri Valley Conference, this was their only game in the fall, kind of a special occasion here. It's a unique circumstance, a unique matchup, and it proved to be more exciting than we thought. UCA led the Bison 6-0 at halftime. So they shut down Trey Lance and this offense for the entire first half. 0 points. UCA led North Dakota State 28-25 with about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So they were hungry for the upset. UCA going into this game as 23-point underdogs. But Trey Lance did what Trey Lance does best. He led the Bison on some quick scoring drives. The Bison scored the final 14 points in this game, defeated the Bears 39-28, winning by 11 points. And Lance, in what could possibly be his final game of his collegiate career, put up 292 total yards with 4 total touchdowns, and to me had an even better day on the ground than he did through the air, with Lance rushing for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. The biggest storyline to come out of this was not just the win for North Dakota State, not just the fantastic performance from Lance, but the one thing that really caught my eye was that Trey Lance threw his first collegiate interception. That's not going to hurt his draft stock. Not one bit. Not when you realize that that was his first career interception in his college career in 307 pass attempts. Trey Lance threw the ball 307 times before he finally threw an interception, that one coming in the third quarter. But Lance led the Bison to a big victory in the Fargo Dome, only in front of just the players' families there, so students not able to attend the game, but certainly cheering them from the outside. And North Dakota State extends their winning streak to 38 straight games, the longest active winning streak in the FCS right now. Back over to some Group of 5 action here. Another top 25 losing in Memphis. The 25th ranked Tigers falling at SMU 30-27. We picked this game. We got this game right, picking SMU in a minor upset here. And the Mustangs looked poised to run away with this. They were up 24-3 early, and actually I turned the game off for a second. I had some other games I wanted to watch, like UCA and North Dakota State. Well, I come back, and I realized that it's 24-20 at halftime. And looking at this, I was like, we're in store for another back and forth game, another close finish like we saw last year when these two teams met in Memphis and the Tigers won 54-48. I also expected more points to be scored. But in the second half, the two teams combined for just 13 points. And SMU's kicker, Chris Nagar, hit a game-winner 43-yard field goal, and SMU escaped with a 3-point victory, 30-27. Shane Buechele, 474 yards, 3 touchdowns. And how about Reggie Robertson? He left the game with an injury, but before he did, 5 receptions, 5 catches, that's it. 5 receptions, 243 yards, and 2 touchdowns. How about that? SMU, they'll be in the rankings, this upcoming AP Top 25 poll. They're going to take the spot of Memphis. And with another huge loss that we're going to touch on here in a second, SMU and Cincinnati could be the top 2 group of 5 teams fighting for that New Year's 6 bowl spot. We now go over back to the SEC. We've kind of gotten rid of our afternoon games. We had a top 10 matchup in between the hedges down in Athens with number 4 Georgia taking on number 7 Auburn. This was the game of the week, without a doubt. And it proved to be pretty lackluster. It was not a big game of the week type feel around halftime, because Georgia absolutely annihilated Gus Malzahn and the Tigers. So a fantastic game if you are a Georgia fan, and all the credit in the world to Georgia here, because they jumped out to a 24-0 lead and were leading the Tigers 24-3 at halftime before ultimately winning 27-6. And, going into this game, I think a lot of people wanted to pick Auburn and maybe did pick Auburn because you looked at how the two teams fared in week 1. They both won their games, but Auburn beat Kentucky, I would say a better opponent, by 16, while Georgia struggled in the first half before finally beating Arkansas 37-10. And I think people said, well, Georgia started so slow, and they've got quarterback questions. They're not going to win at home. They're going to struggle, especially offensively. Was not the case on Saturday night. Stetson Bennett, the mailman, started at quarterback for Georgia. Not JT Daniels, but Stetson Bennett. And the mailman, guys, he delivered 240 yards and 1 touchdown in this game. I thought he looked poised in the pocket. I thought, he had a couple mistakes here and there. But all things considered, making his first ever collegiate start in a top 10 matchup in the Deep South's oldest rivalry, and you put up 240 yards and 1 touchdown, that's pretty dang good. That is pretty dang good. And that Georgia defense that some people criticized a little bit last week looked like the number 1 defense in the country to me, holding Auburn to 216 yards and only 39 rushing yards. So that Georgia defense still up towards the top. Bennett might be the starter now going forward for Georgia. Daniels was cleared to play. Smart decided not to go with him. DeJuan Mathis certainly not going to be the starter anytime soon either. So it's Stetson Bennett, to me, his job to lose. And after this performance, he's going to be looking pretty good going down the stretch. So a very, very impressive performance for the Bulldogs. And you look at Auburn here, obviously a team that struggled offensively in this game, as we mentioned. Bo Nix not getting a touchdown, throwing an interception. He did it all for Auburn last year, did it all for Auburn last week against Kentucky, was unable to get anything going against Georgia in this game. And you might wonder now, is Bo Nix and this Auburn offense going to get anything going against another solid defense in Arkansas? You heard that right. The Arkansas Razorbacks. A good defense? They haven't had that in nearly a decade. They might have it now, because Barry Odom is an absolute genius. The Razorbacks, the team that's won 4 games in the past 2 years combined, a team that has lost 20 straight SEC games, walked into Starkville, Mississippi, and took down Mike Leach and KJ Costello. The same team and the same guy that threw for 623 yards and beat the reigning national champions in LSU 44-34 last week, Arkansas beat them 21-14 for their first SEC win since 2017. Arkansas defeated the 16th ranked Bulldogs for their first SEC win since 2017, snapping that 20-game SEC game losing streak. And you look at this, guys, an unbelievable performance from Barry Odom and this Arkansas defense. They held KJ Costello to 313 yards. That's still a lot of yards, but that's about half of what he put up last week, so pretty dang good. Arkansas intercepted KJ Costello 3 times in this game. One of those returned for a pick 6. The Razorbacks forced 2 turnovers on down, or 2 turnover on downs for Mississippi State. 2 of those coming on 4th and 1, and they forced a fumble as well. 4 turnovers for the Razorbacks in this game. Turnover on downs, left and right. A back and forth game that many thought Arkansas was eventually going to blow. But Sam Pittman walks into Starkville in just his second game as head coach with the Razorbacks and pulls off the monumental upset. The monumental upset. And now many will say, well, Mississippi State didn't have Kylan Hill, their elusive running back, for the majority of the game. So that's a major reason why Mississippi State struggles so much offensively. And that may be so, but you can't make that excuse because a very underwhelming Arkansas offense also did not have their star running back in Rakeem Boyd, who left right around the same time as Kylan Hill in that game. Barry Odom is now my front runner for the Broyles Award, which goes to the top assistant in all of college football. Unbelievable performance from Odom and the Razorbacks defense. And Arkansas, I know it's just been one game, but maybe not looking much like a cupcake team anymore in the SEC. An intriguing matchup next week again as they face Auburn, whose offensive coordinator is Chad Morris, the former Razorbacks head coach. Back over to the American Athletic, briefly, real quick. Central Florida, the 11th ranked team in the country. You're going down. You're probably not making a New Year's Six bowl game. I know it's still early. Yes, you can still win your conference title, but you just lost at home to Tulsa, who snapped your 21-game home winning streak. 21 straight games UCF has won at home. The Golden Hurricane struts into Orlando, wins 34-26. A UCF offense that was averaging 50 points per game held to just 26 points here. They led by 16 at one point. They led 23-5 at one point, but Tulsa scored the final 15 points and led the way with 165 yards of rushing. Josh Heupel, many people want him out. A lot of Central Florida favorites and faithful want him out of Orlando. I think that's a little harsh. I think that's a little early to be calling for his head right now. But a very, very disappointing performance from the Knights after 2 very impressive performances over these past few weeks. And then finally, I know this is the game that a lot of people have wanted to talk about. Number 18, Oklahoma at Iowa State. My man, Cyclone Steve, Mitch Thayer, and Cole Converse. How about those Cyclones? Iowa State. People called me a madman when I picked Iowa State to pull off the upset against Oklahoma back in the summer. They called me a madman a few days ago when I picked them to still pull off this upset. Keep in mind, we've got the Cyclones winning the Big 12, and it's looking pretty dang good now that Texas and Oklahoma both have a loss to their name, and the Sooners now have 2 losses in conference. All the credit in the world to Matt Campbell and his Cyclones team here. They trailed 17-6 early in this game. They trailed 30-23 with 8:17 left. But we said in our Oklahoma-Iowa State preview that Brock Purdy had to make some plays. We said Brock Purdy, who's been lackluster this season, needed to step up. And that's exactly what he did. He had a 65-yard touchdown strike. He had a 2-yard rushing touchdown that tied up the game. And then Breece Hall, who had 155 yards and 3 touchdowns last week against TCU, had 139 yards and 2 touchdowns this week against the Sooners, including the game-winning touchdown with 4:06 left, punching it in from 8 yards out. We said 2 things would happen in this game. We said, number 1, Brock Purdy would throw for 250 yards. He threw for 254. We said that Iowa State would force 2 Oklahoma turnovers. They only forced 1, but it was a big one, and we're going to take it. They forced a lone interception from Spencer Rattler. Had 3 last week against Kansas State. Only had 1 this week against the Cyclones. but it was the very, very costly one, getting intercepted in the end zone with just a minute 2 remaining in the game. That interception sealed the deal for Iowa State. Oklahoma now handed back-to-back losses for the first time since 1999. Iowa State defeating Oklahoma in Ames for the first time since 1960. So after that horrible start to the season with the loss against Louisiana at home, the Cyclones have now won back-to-back games. One over TCU, which looks a lot better now after their win over Texas, and a huge win now over Oklahoma, a team that's going to fall out of the rankings, starting the season 1 and 2. And the top 3 in the Big 12 standings now are Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Kansas State. The only 3 teams in the Big 12 that are still undefeated in conference play, just as everybody predicted. So an unbelievable performance from the Cyclones. Unbelievable upsets left and right in college football. What's next? I mean, come on. Week 4 was wild. Week 5 was wild. Bring it on. Week 6. Let's see it. What do you have for us? A couple things we want to address here. Teams trending up and teams trending down. We'll start with Oklahoma on the teams trending down side. We just touched on them. They're 1 and 2. They've dropped back-to-back games for the first time since 1999, which was the first year with Bob Stoops at the program. And we're now seeing a lot of Oklahoma's youth here. We're seeing a lot of Oklahoma's youth and inexperience, something that they really haven't had to deal with in years past when they've won the Big 12 and made the college football playoff. Both of which I don't think will happen this year for the Sooners. Playoff, absolutely not. Big 12 title still up in the air, but with 2 conference losses, it's looking very, very slim. Kentucky, another team trending down. The Wildcats are sitting at 0-2 right now. The loss to Auburn last week was disappointing. Many thought the Wildcats could go in and pull off that upset. But they didn't. They made too many mistakes, too many turnovers. It is what it is. They return home, though, to face off against Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss, and they fall 42-41 in overtime. Why did they lose by 1 point in overtime? Because they shanked the extra point. They shanked the extra point. They allowed 459 yards, despite putting up 559 yards of their own, but fell to Lane Kiffin and the Rebels. And to me, super cool, things coming full circle here. Luke Logan, who missed the key extra point last year in the Egg Bowl. You all remember how that one worked out. Missed the extra point in the Egg Bowl that gave Mississippi State the victory over the Rebels, comes in and in overtime makes the extra point to give the Rebels their first win of the season on the road against Kentucky. So things do come full circle. Redemption for Luke Logan. Kentucky 0-2, and they do have Mississippi State next week. Now looking like a winnable game. The Bulldogs looking human. But after that, it's Tennessee and Georgia. So if they don't win against the Bulldogs, you could be looking at a Kentucky team that starts 0-5. I know we don't want to see it. I know it's probably not likely, but it is possible. Kansas, real quick, they're a team that could be trending down every single week. Plain and simple, guys. Kansas is a team that could be trending down every single week, but we're nice. We show mercy on the Jayhawks. We put them up here now. They won't be up here for the rest of the season. They're 0-3 with a loss to Coastal Carolina, and they've been outscored in their 2 Big 12 games against Baylor and Oklahoma State, 94-21. They allowed 47 points to Baylor, 47 points to Oklahoma State, and just lost to the Cowboys 47-7. And of course, it's without Spencer Sanders, their star quarterback. Jayhawks fans, you've got to be patient. Give Les Miles some time. Give him some time. It's one of the largest and most difficult rebuilding projects in all of college football. He's going to get there. Many thought they'd improve this year. We didn't. But many thought he'd improve this year. He will get there in the next few years. I can promise you that. Teams trending up. BYU. Strength of schedule's weak. People want the Cougars in the playoffs. It's not going to happen. Not with the return of the Big Ten and the Pac-12. But there's a good chance that the Cougars could finish 10-0. They're 3-0 right now and have outscored their 3 opponents 148-24. That includes this week's victory over Louisiana Tech, 45-14. Kalani Sitake doing a fantastic job with the Cougars. Zach Wilson and this defense, to me, playing out of their minds so far this season. But again, the strength of schedule simply not good enough for the Cougars to make a run for the playoffs, but could be in store for a very good bowl spot in 2020. NC State, touched on them earlier. They defeated Pittsburgh this past weekend. Major upset. Not many people saw that one coming. They're 2-1. I didn't have high expectations for the Wolfpack. I thought they'd really struggle this year after they went 4-8 last year. They're 2-1 now, with a winnable game against Virginia coming up next week, and then Duke right after that. So Dave Dobrin's squad could start 4-1, maybe 3-2, worst case scenario. So things really trending in the right direction, I would say, for Dave Dobrin and the Wolfpack, surprising everybody. That win over Pittsburgh, truly unbelievable. And then finally, Kansas State. A few weeks ago, this is a Kansas State team that fell to Arkansas State out of the Sun Belt at home. And now here they are with an upset win over Oklahoma and now a 10-point victory over Texas Tech where they put up 404 yards of offense. Keep in mind, they put up 400 yards of offense against the Sooners last week. And this was a Kansas State offense I really thought would struggle. Outside of Skylar Thompson, I really didn't see that they had that much there. But Deuce Vaughn playing out of his mind for the Wildcats, and Chris Kleiman doing a fantastic job turning his program around, getting this team back on track. And they've got an intriguing matchup next week as they take on TCU, who again just took down the 9th-ranked Texas Longhorns in Austin. So again, we said it at the beginning, we'll say it now, 2020, we're just 5 weeks in. It's already been crazier than 2007. I guarantee it. Guarantee it. And we've got so much more football left to play. Only 2 weeks into the SEC season, only a few weeks into Big 12 conference play. We haven't even seen the Big 10 take the field yet. We haven't even seen the Pac-12 hit the field yet. So many more teams that are going to come in here and just make things even worse, make things even wilder, but obviously a lot more fun and interesting for us, the die-hard college football fans. So week 4, you outdid yourself. Week 5, you outdid yourself. Week 6, you've got some major shoes to fill, but at this rate, I would expect you to be even better than these 2 weeks combined. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. And also make sure to check out everything down in the description below. You can follow us on our social media pages. You can sign up for our newsletter and expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. And of course, you can sign up using our promo code GRIDIRON over on BetNow for all of your betting needs, regardless of the sport, some of the best betting options out there. So make sure to go check out betnow.eu. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.